Hello everyone. I'm really trying to get into this because I've seen today's episode, and I think this is kind of an episode that really hits home for me on a lot of levels. At the time of this recording, my birthday was 2 days ago at the time of this recording, so I am now officially 26. I basically just went to a friend's party just yesterday. We literally just got back. But I was able to take my work off for today because it technically fell on my birthday, but my birthday was on a Saturday, but they let me take either that Friday or Monday off, and I'm taking today off. But let's just get into this episode because there's a lot to unpack with this one, and it's a really, really good episode, and dare I say it, I think this might be the best episode of the season so far. Alright. This is Surf and or Turf. So this episode starts out with the cutie map with the CMNC called in because the map basically are calling the CMNC. And amazingly, Twilight doesn't freak out over this. But essentially, they're basically getting called to Mount Ares, where the hippogriffs are.
The home of the hippogriffs. And that's where you're headed. Whoa.
So yeah. So we got ourselves a CMNC episode, and we're going to Mount Ares, whereas in the movie, it was mostly a ghost town, but we now actually get to visit the home of the hippogriffs. So after the opening, Twilight actually ends up joining the CMNC, so it's nice to know that the CMNC do have adult supervision this time on this mission.
I know that, but I'm not so sure the ponies who care about you want you going off so far on your own. Besides, there's some school business I need to take care of on Mount Ares. This permission slip is for Silverstream. It's very important that her mother and father sign it, or else no field trip.
Wait, so if you say no field trips, does that mean all field trips that you're gonna have?
Sounds like some pony just wants a vacation. Okay, yes, I have been wanting to visit Mount Ares ever since the hippogriffs moved back, but it's purely research.
Sure it is. So then we go on the train where Apple Bloom then proceeds to retell basically the climax of the movie that apparently Applejack told her.
The hippogriffs all once lived happily on Mount Ares. But when the Storm King invaded, they used the magic pearl to turn into sea ponies and escape to the underwater safety of Sequestria.
I love how everybody is so infatuated with this whole thing. Like, they had no idea of everything that went down in the movie.
Then, in the Battle of Canterlot, when Applejack defeated the Storm King... Wait, what? She told you she defeated him? By herself?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, Apple Bloom, it's kind of interesting how you say that Applejack conceded the Storm King, considering that I have seen the movie, and Applejack, along with Fluttershy, barely did anything in the entire movie up until the climax. And in case anyone was keeping track record, technically, Tempest beat the Storm King by encasing him in stone and then falling off basically the edge and destroyed. So technically, Tempest defeated the Storm King. So they arrive at Mount Ares, which I gotta admit, on first glance of this panning shot, it looks incredibly beautiful. As we see, whereas compared to the movie, we've seen that Mount Ares has become a lot more lively, and there's a lot more color going on compared to where the ponies were the last time they were there.
I don't know, but hippogriffs don't have cutie markers, so it might not have anything to do with that at all.
So they go traveling around Mount Ares some more, and I don't know if it was just lazy animation, but it's just like Twilight and the CMNC were just kind of like bouncing off the stairs like they were in a video game. I don't know, that scene just looks a little bit awkward to me.
Excuse me, Miss Ford.
But they basically meet Silverstream's brother named Terramar.
Can I ask Sam? It is kind of strange.
So we see in the one scene where we see Terramar in the ocean, but he was able to change into a hippogriff. And this was something I kind of glanced over with Silverstream in the beginning in the season premiere, where she was able to change, from hippogriff to sea pony. But apparently, from what we find,
after the Storm King was defeated, the sea ponies didn't have to hide anymore. So some of them changed back to hippogriffs and went home to Mount Eris.
But others got used to living under the water and stayed in Sequestria.
Yeah, so apparently, from what I gathered, every single hippogriff was given a pendant of the pearl that Queen Nova had in the movie, since after the Storm King's defeat, it wasn't necessary for them to hide anymore. So they each get to wear a pendant that basically allows the hippogriffs to change from hippogriff to sea pony at any time.
And me? Well, I kind of go back and forth. With this, it's a tiny piece of the magic pearl. It was split up among our kingdoms.
Yeah, so if anyone was wondering about that problem of how Silverstream was able to do it in the season premiere, there's your answer. So while Twilight goes to try to find Terramar/Silverstream's parents, they basically eat the hippogriffs, basically in their flying form, as we get...
And now, I officially open the Glad to be a Hippogriff Festival!
Glad to be a Hippogriff Festival. That's kind of a weird name, but then again, it's their culture, so who am I to argue? So then they have this, some kind of race duel thing, like I guess it's supposed to be Quidditch or something. But essentially the pony that announced this is Silverstream and Terramar's father.
Seen you a day, son. Wish you'd come around more often.
Oh, Dad, these are Silverstream's friends from Equestria. They came up to...
Princess Twilight Sparkle.
Also has to know what a hippogriff scream looks like.
Attention, every griff! Princess Twilight Sparkle is here. She's Silverstream's teacher.
I'm really kind of amazed how the hippogriffs just kind of glance over the fact and not one of them is like, hey, isn't that the pony that tried to steal our pearl and try to endanger us when the Storm King was still a tyrant? Kind of amazing that they just kind of dropped it, but then again, they saved Equestria, so who am I to argue? So while Twilight joins on the festivities, the CMNC basically meet up with Terramar and basically talk out what essentially his problem is.
All my relatives are nice. That's kind of the problem.
Wait, stop! What's that?
But we see that Sweetie Belle gets really infatuated by the place called the Harmonizing Heights, which is essentially, I feel like we're about to get into the Sound of Music territory, because we see Sweetie Belle really enjoys it.
Is she okay?
This is absolutely the best place ever! You are so lucky! And you get to swim in the ocean! You have 2 great places to live! How do you make up your mind which one to stay in?
I can't. That's the problem.
Did you say problem? You have a problem? Yes!
I like how Terramar's just looking at them when they're being excited, like, what are they talking about? So essentially, this essentially leads to our problem that I think really kind of hits home for me as Sweetie Belle continues to get excited, and he explains what the problem actually is.
Like I said, Mount Eris is one great place to live. That's why Silverstream and my dad and some of my cousins came back here. But Sequestria is another great place to live. That's where my mom is.
Oh.
Oh. Yeah. So, in case anyone hasn't put 2 and 2 together, this kind of basically implies that Silverstream and Terramar's parents are divorced. And that Terramar's dad loves to live in Mount Ares while his mom lives in Sequestria. Yeah, and I think obviously I can definitely relate to this, because the thing is, for me, my parents have been divorced probably almost about a good 2 decades now. I think I was like 3 or 4 by the time that they were divorced, and I wasn't emotionally mature enough to try to process everything that was going on. Whatever times they were fighting about, I either just kind of glanced over it or just completely forgot about it. I know my dad one night read me a book about the concept of divorce and how it all works, and I'm trying to remember if we still have that book around. I don't think we do, but it was basically like a book about a pair of cats who basically, I can't remember the name of it, but it basically did allow me to grasp the concept. But like I said, I was like 4 or 5 when the whole process kind of transitioned, and I basically, over the years, I've basically gotten used to it because there was a set schedule where I wasn't really forced to choose to be with one parent over the other. There was a set schedule that me and my sister would go to every once in a while where I'm trying to remember, we would be with my dad, like, usually Mondays and Tuesdays. We would be with our mom Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then we would alternate every other weekend, every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But yeah, seeing Terramar's situation, it definitely hits home for me because but again, I wasn't really emotionally mature enough to kind of grasp the concept of what was going on, but I can definitely see what the problem is. So anyways, Terramar still feels unsure about what to do, so the CMNC decided to come up with a chart to list out all the pros and cons between Mount Aries and Sea Equestria.
Share them, and your decision is made for it. Well, it's obvious, isn't it? Mount Aries is the best of all possible worlds. Pro, it's beautiful. Con, too far from Equestria. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, but we kind of see where this is going because we see that Sweetie Belle really enjoys Mount Aries.
You haven't been to Equestria yet. How can you even compare them?
Terramar's right, Sweetie Belle. It'd be more fair if we visit both places before we decide.
So before they go to Equestria, we see Twilight now being still the ever so lovable dork that she is.
But of course, I'm really here on business. Skybeak's already signed the form. Now I just need your mom's signature. Is she around? She's a sea pony in Equestria.
So we then go to Equestria where we actually see how the changing works when more than one pony has to be a part of it, where apparently the ponies have to hold hands in order to go for the transformation. As we do get to see the pony sea designs again, like what happened in the movie, even though I'm still wondering why the hell Spike was a blowfish and became the movie, I really don't get the joke there. But we see that Scootaloo actually really enjoys swimming under the sea the most. Oh, yeah, and obviously part of the reason why we see Scootaloo enjoying Equestria is because knowing what Scootaloo has gone through, how she's unable to fly, her swimming around freely is the closest she's going to get to flying. Yeah. So then we meet Terramar's mom, who basically says hi as Twilight then introduces herself.
Both my children are so smart. Would you like to see their baby pictures?
Mom, that sounds adorable. I'd love to. And, you know, to find out about aquatic pony early development and, research.
Oh, well, maybe your friends would like a snack while we're gone? Some kelp chips, fish oil tea?
No thanks, Mom. I'm gonna go show them around.
So now we get the opposite contrast of what we had from Mount Aries, where we see Scootaloo is really enjoying being under the ocean, while Sweetie Belle is not really a fan of it.
Not much sunlight down here, is there? Boom, bada, boom, bada, boom, bada, boom, bada, boom, bada, boom, bada, boom.
Well, this is depressing.
I think that's probably everyone's reaction to just seeing Scootaloo all happy, seeing that this is the closest she's going to get to flying. So then we pretty much get the contrast back and forth of Scootaloo enjoying the sea and Sweetie Belle not really enjoying it as they head back up to the surface.
Princess Twilight, you're back! And just in time for the screeching competition.
Well, that's probably going to be a bad thing for all the expensive plates.
Why not? Could be another trophy in my future. Be back soon.
We see Twilight getting into it, and while she's off to do that, we go back to the compare and contrast to see how the positives and negatives of living in Equestria.
Swimming is like flying, multicolored fish, and did I mention the flying fish? Super
I think one thing I definitely like about this episode, because it really focuses on 4 characters, but we do see signs of their respective opinions. We see Sweetie Belle being the pony that really loves Mount Aries, but is not a huge fan of Sequestria. But we see Scootaloo really being infatuated with Sequestria, but not really the biggest fan of Mount Aries. And we see Apple Bloom is kind of like the middle straight man, trying to keep everything under control.
Both places have a lot of good things about them. I can understand why
Alright.
people choose to decide.
Alright, so regrettably, I'm going to have to mute this because unfortunately this leads to our next song. And I really say unfortunate because honestly, this is a huge step up from the previous 2 songs. Yeah, and by the way, because I didn't have enough time to look them up at the end of the series premiere, apparently the first song that played in the first part of the season premiere is The School of Friendship, whoop-de-frickin-do, and the second song that was played at the end of the second part of the season premiere was The Friendship Always Wins. The next song that plays in this episode, Your Heart Is in Two Places, is honestly a very good song, and honestly probably the best CMNC song that we haven't seen in a while. It continues to give basically through lyrics and great solos between Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo, basically the different contrasts, as we see Sweetie Belle give all the positives of Mount Aries, but we see Scootaloo basically stepping in and basically giving all the positives of Sequestria. And again, just seeing the Scootaloo enjoying the swimming, the closest that she can get to flying, it's like my heart breaks for her, because this is probably so much fun that she's had the most. But unfortunately, Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo end up butting heads and do the classic friendship breakup, whereas, as I said, Apple Bloom is pretty much in the middle in all of this. But ultimately, by the end of the song and the amount of bickering between Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo, this ends up confusing Terramar and leaving him frustrated.
Terramar, where are you going?
If you all can't even agree amongst yourselves, how am I supposed to make up my mind? It's hopeless.
Well, this is depressing. So after the commercial break, we see that Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle are so busy competing and butting heads that they have to make Apple Bloom be their messenger, even though they're literally sitting like 5 feet apart from them, and Apple Bloom tries to be the one to bring them together, but Twilight basically sees what's going on.
Where's Terramar? Well, he just kind of left. He wanted to be by himself. Which was not my fault. Mine either. Well, of course not. Why would you think that?
I like how Apple Bloom back ups and basically saying hey, this is on you guys. I was trying to keep you guys together. This is on you. And it's really kind of like what I was saying before, how basically Apple Bloom is basically kind of like the straight man of the CMNC for this episode, where she tries to keep in mind both the positives and the negatives of both locations without being biased to one or the other.
Because it was our fault. All we had to do was help him choose which world to live in. And we let him down. Whoever said that he had to choose? Well, he did.
Yeah, so then we see Terramar's parents actually show up, and we do see that they are cordial with one another, which does give the CMNC their ideas as they're able to find him on a tree.
Help you, and we just ended up confusing you more. It's all our fault.
Oh, great. You're sorry, and I'm still confused. I'm staying in my tree.
We might have something.
But the CMNC do bring Terramar as they see that all the hippogriffs, both the land and sea ponies, are actually together having a good time, as we see Terramar's parents interacting with Twilight, and we do get our moral for this episode.
And we're sorry if we ever made you think you had to choose between worlds. That wasn't our intention, honey.
Your hippogriff heritage is something to be proud of, certainly.
But you're more than just where you're from or who you live with. We love you because you're you, no matter where you choose to be.
You don't have to decide. You can keep doing what you've been doing, going back and forth.
And enjoying both places.
Like I said, this definitely hits home for me because I really do enjoy, being around my parents equally growing up, since like I said, I wasn't emotionally mature enough to kind of grasp the whole concept, even though I was taught it at age 5, where I did get it, but a lot of it just glanced over my head. Nowadays, I don't really have that option, because between work and the limited time off I have every year, there's only so little opportunities I can go to see my dad. Like, there's probably only a few times in the entire year I can go up to see him in Rhode Island. Easter, 1 week in August, which is actually going to be the week after, so literally in like 2 weeks I'll be able to go see him. And Christmas, and that's it. Those are literally the only times I can actually go up to see him. The only other time that I was able to go see him would be up to April, which was basically to see the Mitchell College dance team perform. So that's one other time I'm able to go up to see him. So literally only 3 or 4 times throughout the entire year I can go up to see my dad. So seeing this episode definitely hits home for me a lot. As we see, the CMNC do actually find a compromising agreement of what both locations have in common.
Family and friends who love you.
Thanks for everything.
And it's because of this that they've managed to complete their objectives by the cutie map.
That mission is a success. Guess that means we're officially done here. I hope you come visit your sister in Equestria. Yeah, that was a joke.
So the episode ends with Terramar walking off with both his parents and enjoying both of their lives, and that's the end. Ugh. So that was Surf and/or Turf, and honestly, I think this might be the best episode of the season so far. I think this episode really hits home for me a lot with the amount of divorce metaphors, but I really like how the CMNC were very handful. We see Apple Bloom being the straight person, being the middleman of trying to stay focused on the mission and finding both positives and negatives at both locations. We see Sweetie Belle's point of view of how much she enjoys Mount Aries over Sequestria, and again, seeing Scootaloo just really enjoy swimming, the closest she'll get to flying just completely breaks my heart just to watch. But on top of that, we do get to see so much world building, especially to see how the hippogriffs have evolved after the Storm King's defeat. There was definitely a lot of funny moments, and while there was one iffy animation moment I met with just the CMNC and Twilight just like hopping down the stairs, it's a little bit awkward, but it is nice to see the point of views of somebody who's going through what it's like of living with parents who are divorced, or if they're still trying to figure out that process. Honestly, this episode really has I have nothing to complain about this episode, except maybe 1 or 2 nitpicks, but nothing that overall breaks the episode. Like I said, we're only 6 episodes into the season, but I think honestly this might be my favorite episode of the season so far. This really hits home to me, and I think kids might be able to grasp the concept of all this. So, as a whole, I think Surf and/or Turf, I think it's an A. I think really just the only thing I'm not a fan of is some of the bits of animation, and like I said, I think just the whole breakup between the CMNC, mostly between Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle, going into the 3rd act, but thankfully it doesn't last too long. But yeah, as a whole, Surf and/or Turf gets an A. Alright, I'm glad to have gotten this episode out of the way, and there was a lot to unpack, but it's a really good episode. Alright, so next time we are going to be looking at horseplay. See you guys next time. Bye.